Calgary, Alberta grew from a small settlement nestled at the fork of the Bow and Elbow Rivers. Originally a fort for the Northwest Mounted Police, it was titled after the Norse term Kaldgard, meaning cold garden, a fitting name for a place with winters that last more than half a year. Calgary, now home to more than 1 million people, is where we find a new microbrewery whose name is derived from that very Norse phrase, Cold Garden Beverage Company. A brew house is an incredible place. When you first see the fermenter and kettle, you become a kid again. You're in the presence of something magical that brings joy into your life. At one time considered a holy art, it's now practiced by a new generation of those daring and crazy enough to run their own business with an imagination and a passion for all things beer. Joining me today is Blake Belding, Cold Garden's head brewer. He's an alchemist of sorts, combining water, barley, and whatever else inspires him into that most fabled of beverages, once handled only by the Trappist monks of Belgium.
So these are our fermentation vessels right here. This is where you put what you call sweet wort, and you mix yeast in there, and then the beer ferments. When that's complete, it gets pushed over into these, which is our bright tanks. And this is where it'll age and condition a bit, and we also carbonate in the bright tanks.
You've got a cooling line coming down here, and I can't help but notice they're covered in pool noodles.
Yeah, those are pool noodles. It was actually a more effective way to insulate our lines, and we kind of figured it represented the space a little bit better than a normal black insulation, yeah.
It sounds like we've got stuff sort of ready to go in each of these, or at least...
Each of these tanks has a beer that's carbonated and ready to go.
And ready to drink.
Here we have the Lisa Lime IPA. This is our coffee porter. We call it the all-nighter. This is our raspberry blonde, which is called the pool noodle raspberry blonde.
The pool noodle, sure.
And then the last one here is our East Calgary lager, which is a Vienna lager.
All right, and I think we've ended up in our lab here.
Yeah, this is my makeshift laboratory, and I was actually working on a new style of beer, so I was going to test it out with you. I was going to show you my process, and then
I get to try something new.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm absolutely up for that. Yeah,
awesome.
What are we going to try?
So I'm taking our base IPA recipe and I'm adding squid ink to it. So I'm trying to give it a really dark, rich black color, but still kind of maintain that IPA flavor.
And this is made with actual squid ink.
Actual squid ink. It's right here, yeah. You should
dark.
Give that a smell, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that smells like the ocean.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is exciting. I've got to say, in all of the pints that I've had, I don't think any have ever contained squid ink.
Perfect, that's the idea.
Awesome, excellent. Okay, let's do it.
Okay. There you go.
Fantastic. So that is a very, very dark IPA. There's a phenomenal cascade happening here. It's excellent action. Okay, well, squid ink IPA, bottoms up. Cheers. That's fantastic.
Good. You
This is really tasty. Yeah. There's definitely something added to the IPA flavor.
Yeah, the squid ink itself, it's full of a lot of minerals and salts and stuff.
Sure.
And if you've ever been at a bar and seen someone salt their beer before, have you seen that? Mm-hmm. You do that to kind of increase the body and bring out some of the malt sweetness. And so that's the idea with the squid ink, is use the minerals in it to add to the flavor, but to kind of not have that dominating sea smell to it. And then the color you see, which is kind of super pronounced.
That's a great visual. We've got a dark IPA, a really unique, interesting head. The optics are fantastic, and the flavor's bang on. This is a wonderful IPA.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
cool.
Right on. I'm going to finish this if you don't
mind.
Squid ink IPA. Chris Fiorentino is Cold Garden's taproom manager, marketing director, cicerone in training, and avid beer geek. Since their taproom is still under construction, we're meeting at National on 10th to celebrate their first official keg launch. Chris and I are discussing Cold Garden's first 2 beers to ever be served in a public house.
The fact that I just ordered my own beer at a bar is surreal, and I'm freaking out inside right now.
That's fantastic. I'm so excited for you guys. We're going to try both. Okay, so we're going to start, I'm guessing, with the raspberry blonde.
Okay. The whole story behind its name is that we insulated our glycol lines with pool noodles. And so here we have the raspberry blonde. So if you take a nice big whiff of it, On the nose, you get these really bright, vibrant raspberry flavors, right?
Yeah, that's a big nose.
But then you take your first sip, and instead of being inundated with that overwhelming sweetness or tartness from raspberry, you get like the really nice, mellow, soft flavors of a blonde. So then we use Cascade hops to kind of balance out the citrus with the raspberry.
Sure.
And I think it finishes with a really nice, subtle, fruity raspberry sweetness.
Well, let's give it a
Take
try.
a sip, yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah.
It's a milder raspberry flavor. It's more beer than fruit, definitely.
Exactly.
But that nose just comes right out. That's good.
So,
That is excellent. Okay.
now we started with the raspberry because this guy's a little bit hoppier, a little
Yeah,
bit bitter.
yeah.
This is the Lisa Lime IPA. So on the nose, you're going to get more of the traditional West Coast IPA, so very citrusy, a little bit tropical. And then when you get your first sip, a little bit citrusy, and it's a little bit bitter, but I would say that it's mid-range bitter. It's about 58 IBU. And then I find that the first, like on the very forward flavor notes, it's that Cascade and Amarillo citrus hops. But when it finishes, you get just these really nice subtle hints of lime.
Perfect. That sounds wonderful.
That's my favorite, yeah.
Right. Yeah, the lime does come out in the finish. You're
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
It starts off as a pretty straight IPA.
Yeah.
And then you get this sort of lime right as it's traveling.
Exactly. I like the blonde, but to me, I think this is the real one.
This is the one,
Yeah,
right?
this is my favorite for sure. Yeah.
You know, IPAs have that reputation of being really big and really bitter, but they don't have to be. The style can be really bright and light and finishing clean. This is another great example of a summer beer for sure. Well, cheers.
A visit to National on 10th wouldn't be complete without partaking in their many recreational activities. From ping pong and table hockey to a bowling alley under the bar, they've got a selection of pursuits that could almost rival the number of beers on tap, which stands at a step above 70. We've convinced Cold Garden's co-owner, Dan Allard, to bowl some frames with us and talk about the process of starting a microbrewery in Calgary.
I've been talking about opening a brewery since I was about 18. I remember being 18, I was in my first year of college, and I had this, like, taking books out from the library and reading about the beer industry, and I have a folder still saved with the AGLC laws from back then. And it's like, shows the minimum, the required minimum, and I remember being like, oh man, how am I gonna afford that much, those many tanks, right? And then the laws changed in 2013 and made it a lot easier to open a brewery in Alberta.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So in a couple of years, let's say in 3 years, where am I going to be able to get a pint of Cold Garden going to plan?
The moon.
The moon. Yeah. Come to a tap room, you know, that's what we want to see most.
Sure,
Right?
yeah. Was the idea to build the tap room on the same premises as the brewery sort of a day one thing, or did that evolve out of something else?
Always. I mean, it's the taproom concept in breweries, like nowadays, kind of it's the guiding force.
And it was always, you always wanted it to share space, right? The idea was that the tap room was going to always look into the production floor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was critical to the model, right? Like, we want to make sure that people know they're in a brewery, right? And they want to see the action, see the tanks without being inhibited by any sort of fire guard or glass or anything like that. You know, Blake's brewing in there. We want to see him getting dirty and Drewing, right?
In his coveralls and rubber boots and
Yeah,
Swearing,
Drewing
just
up,
getting
cursing
angry.
and
pumps and pouring all over himself. Yeah, and that's like the whole premise, right? And it was important for us to be in Inglewood because I think they really embraced that vibe out there.
Sure.
You know, like real, like blue collar kind of vibe. Just you see what you get, and we're not hiding anything. And
Right, yeah.
The history there, the history and the history of the Calgary brewing industry, that's where it started, you know?
Right. You guys are just down the street from the original Calgary Brewery.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's obviously on purpose. That played into the
We
location.
wanted to be in the shadow of the old brewery there, just bringing community beer back to Inglewood, back to the city.
That's an awesome nod to the history of brewing in this.
Yeah. The guiding force behind the whole business, I think, is just building a place that we'd like to be a customer at.
The kind of place you'd like to drink in,
Yeah.
try beers at.
Yeah.
Places where